Hey, young adults, I am so glad you're here. My name is Lucas Amell. This is the Young Voices in Christ, a podcast where young adults around Milwaukee share their ideas on how to be a better disciple of Christ. This podcast is produced by the Milwaukee Institute of Religion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is not an official church production. Here today, I am here with the Chausows. So Elder Sister Chausow, hello. Thank you so much for coming in.
Hi, Lucas. Thanks for having us.
Yes, Lucas, it's wonderful to be together.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. So, we put a lot of forethought into our topic for today, and we were going to talk a little bit more about how our covenants keep us safe. So that's going to be our topic today. I'm sure that both of you kind of premeditated a little bit about what we want to be talking about. But Elder Chausow, why don't you just tell us a little bit, for those that might not know that are tuning in today, what are covenants and why might those be important?
So that's a great question. Covenants are promises that we make to God and that He makes back to us. So it's kind of like a two-way promise, or maybe almost even like a contract that we make with God. Typically, we make those as in association with what we call ordinances. So an example of an ordinance is baptism, or partaking of the Lord's Supper, the sacrament, as we call it, the bread and water that we partake of each Sunday. And when we participate in those kinds of ordinances, as part of that ordinance, we typically make covenants or two-way promises with God.
That's a great explanation. So, Sister Chausow, why don't you just give us some of the examples of some of those covenants that we do make? For example, when we step into the waters of baptism, I'm sure a lot of people here are curious about what baptism means and what these covenants are. Can you just give a little bit of an overview, and then, we'll dive into the meat and potatoes of examples?
Yes, thank you. So baptism is a wonderful time in your life when you are taking on the name of Christ. And that is what you're covenanting, that you are saying, yes, I want to be known as a Christian. I want to be known as a follower of Jesus Christ. And you're also promising that you'll help and take care of others. You'll mourn with people who mourn. You'll comfort those that need comfort. That, in a way, you will try and follow in the footsteps of Jesus himself in your interactions.
So the third part of that, or the other part of that, is that then God promises back to us that He will send His Spirit to be with us. So we make those promises, like Sister Chausow said, to comfort those that stand in need of comfort, to follow Jesus Christ, to take His name upon us, to be disciples of Christ, to try to emulate Him or follow Him or let Him be our example in life and try to be like Him as much as we possibly can in our weak human way. And He promises back to send His Spirit to be with us, to guide us and direct us in our lives. And that's a great source of strength and power for us as we make that promise. And He makes it back.
That. Yeah, I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. And I think it's very comforting for individuals stepping into the water of baptism, knowing that it's not just this one-way street. When you come out of the waters of baptism, you're not coming out alone. And you're not alone for the rest of your life. So
that's true. That's so great. That's a wonderful way to put that, Lucas.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about, our topic, right? When we say this, what does that mean to you? So when we say the topic of, hey, our covenants are meant to keep us safe, what does that mean to you personally?
So I think for me, it's, as you go through life, just on an hour-by-hour basis in day-to-day living, so to speak, right? You're constantly having different experiences, different interactions with different people, and so forth. And sometimes those are really positive interactions. And then sometimes, for me anyway, they might be interactions that make me maybe frustrated or maybe even thinking about getting angry. But as I remember the covenants that I've made, that no, I'm trying to be like Jesus Christ. I'm trying to follow in His footsteps. Satan, the adversary, would want me to get angry right now with this person because they're doing something really not helpful in the situation we're in. But the Savior never went around screaming at people or whatever. As we read about his life, he was kind, he was compassionate, he was patient. And so when I get in those situations and I remember that I've made these covenants, that I'm trying to be like Jesus in a simple way, it helps me to control my actions, to control the things I say, control
Sure.
the things I do, and try not to get angry, try to be patient, try to say, well, hey, let's see how we can resolve this situation, whether it's at work or whatever the case may be. And hopefully that helps me to be a better person, and it protects me from doing things that I might regret. Whether that's in interactions with other people, saying things, once those words are out there, you can't take them back. Actions that you can't undo sometimes as much as you try. So it does, for me, that's one of the ways that I feel like those covenants provide protection for me.
Sure. So you're noticing it, at least in this example, in a social sense, in how you interact with other people around you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I love that.
And I could say, the covenant, the promises we make when we partake of the sacrament, one of the promises that we have is that when we partake of it, we'll have his spirit to be with us. And I need that during the week. I need to feel that his spirit is with me and that I can have courage and be brave and feel comforted. And it's in all of those things, it keeps me safe and directed in the way that I want to go. And not have regrets about, right? Because regret does weigh heavy on your shoulders.
It's one of the heaviest things there is. So for those two that don't know what sacrament is, can you maybe just give a high level what that means?
So the sacrament is the bread and water that we take each week. The bread represents the flesh of Christ, and the water represents his blood that was spilled for us. So it's it's a pretty sacred time for us, and the church asks that you partake of it when you're worthy, and that you can really feel the blessings that come from partaking it. I don't like to miss church. I don't like missing the sacrament. I need that in my life.
Yeah, and the idea behind that is that every week when we do attend church and partake in the sacrament, we're renewing those covenants that we made when we stepped into the waters of baptism.
That's right.
We're reminding ourselves and almost re-upping those promises to God on a weekly basis. So that's why baptism is so important. That's why, these covenants that we make are so important. And truly what keeps us safe, because every once in a while, you color outside of the lines. Nobody's perfect.
Yep.
Right? But that is our time, at least once a week, that we're able to come back, reflect on how the week went, and then, set some standards and some benchmarks for ourselves moving forward.
Yeah.
I like that word you used, reflect. When we partake of that sacrament, those emblems, those symbols of Christ's sacrifice for us. Yeah, it's a great time every single week at church on Sunday as we're going through that ordinance, that sacrament, to think back on how did I do this week, and kind of say, hey, here's some areas I was really successful at. Here's some areas I needed to work on. Maybe I didn't handle this quite as well as I should. And it allows us to renew that promise that we made when we were baptized, to follow Christ, to take his name upon us. And again, to renew that promise that God gives to us, that, okay, keep working on it, and I will keep sending my Spirit to help you with that. And as Jill said, that gift of the Spirit is such a powerful influence in our lives and such an important thing that is such a huge blessing that God gives to us.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. And I'm happy that you said that, Elder Chausow, too, because I think, truthfully, that a lot of people, they kind of view church as almost a box to check off. Even if they view themselves as very religious, it's, hey, I go to church on Sunday for an hour, you partake in whatever kind of ritual maybe your denomination is following. But in reality, this is so much more than just, hey, I need to check this box, show up to church on Sunday. It's who you are all the time, right? A church is just, an institution where we can partake in rituals to help bring God back, to be there with us. And it's a time that we can reflect on, how can I be better when I'm not in this building? And that's what a lot of these covenants that we take upon us are, and why we're trying to aspire to be more and more like Jesus. It's not when we're within these walls. It's not when we're talking to our church friends who may hold us to a higher standard. It's, to your point, how we actually started this whole conversation. It's, how can you be that better, best version of yourself when you're dealing with other types of people who maybe they're belligerent, maybe they're, being very non-Christ-like. You still need to be an example, and if you're carrying these covenant promises with you and really striving to be that best version of yourself, it really, really makes a difference. So that was, I guess, the point that I was trying to drive home with it too, is like, although church is extremely important, how we're choosing to live outside of the four walls that we're in right now is really, really going to be what we're being judged at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Lucas. I think, it's easy to be Christ-like when you're at church, right? I mean, relatively. I mean,
That's what I'm getting at.
It still requires some work and effort on our part, because we still have to interact with other members of our congregation, et cetera. And, so there still can be challenges. But in general, it's pretty easy to behave well, so to speak, to do the right things when we're at church. But like you say, we need that self-fortification to take it with us on a weekly basis. We come here, we get built up as we renew those covenants with God and partake of the sacrament. And then we go out into the real world, so to speak. And, it's doing is important, but what really is happening over time is, as we try to do the right things or do the things that Jesus would do, the real goal is to become like Jesus more than to just do. So that we, it becomes a part of who we are as a person, as a follower of Jesus Christ. And that's just the way we treat others in a normal, natural way. It's because of who we've become over time by keeping those covenants. And that provides us, a great way to live our lives, to draw closer to God and to be a good person and fulfill those covenants to help others and lift others around us.
Mm-hmm. And getting back to our question, like, how does that keep us safe? It helps us know when to walk away, not get involved in, if the Spirit's not there, we don't need to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I like that spiritual guidance. It keeps me safe.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Tune in again next week and tell your friends.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chausows. We really appreciate it. This was absolutely amazing. You really gave all the listeners so much to ponder and think about relating to baptism and living a Christ-like life, as well as, truthfully, what church can mean for you. So, for all you listeners, please leave a comment about what you liked best so we can bring you more messages like this and more messages that matter to you. If you know of any young adults who could benefit from any kind of midweek messages of faith, please share this episode with them. Special shout out to those who have made this podcast possible: our project manager, Vance Carter, the sound editor, Jake Stoll, and the cover art by Jasmine Carter. Till next time, take care all.
Goodbye.